half an hour and then some 40 minutes. Okay. And then some questions. And I know because I sat down over there, the bit of paper already got a couple of questions on it. But please take some time to write some questions. After the 30 minutes, there is time in the program. So I'd like to start a little bit context about how I get to the point I'm at. It's one of the things
I reinforce a lot with athletes and coaches when I'm working with them is a bit about why. So what's the purpose in what you're doing? Why is it so? Why do you believe those things that you believe? Because then it provides a bit more information about, well, then we know it's easy to work out what the what is it that you want to do, and how is it that you want to do it. So I'll talk a little bit about my journey to get here. I would love it if the road for my journey was a bit like that, but it's not. And that's good, actually, because a journey like that is a bit dull in some ways, and not necessarily great for learning. But I equally am glad that it hasn't been quite like that, because this is overwhelming and then actually, again, very difficult to learn. For me, I would say that the times that I have learnt the best have been a bit more like this. I don't know, can you guys, how far back do I need to stand so you can see? Have been a bit like this, where you're kind of living on the edge a bit, and you're pushing your own boundaries, and you can actually, at the end of that, maybe get to somewhere quite nice and learn a lot from it. So doing something like this is a bit like this for me today, coming to a place that I don't know well with a group of people that I don't know well, and being expected to do 40 minutes when the slides go for exactly 30, but that's all right. The other thing I noticed this morning when we were towards the earliest people here, and one of the first things I saw was two very young lads sitting in the audience for what I expected to be a group of coaches. I thought, are you guys actually coaching? No? That's all right. I was going to be so impressed if you were, and I did ask a question and got so, oh no, they're the work experience boys with the cricket development officer, but welcome all the same. I'll get you both up later to embarrass yourselves. So my journey into sports psychology really started quite early. I grew up playing a lot of tennis and a bit of golf and cricket, and I got fascinated with sports psychology. I got fascinated for a few reasons. One, I learned that being smart was a bit of an advantage, and I suppose that came to me because I realised that the person with the best skills didn't always win. And that's not just from me playing, but from watching a lot of sport, and we're sitting in a regional town in Australia, which means that a lot of you, I expect, spend a lot of time playing and watching sport growing up because it's kind of part of the culture. I also learned that winning wasn't easy. I had this habit playing tennis, and it would be nice to say it was every match I ever played, but it wasn't. But some certainly I would be able to get out to an early lead, and then I would have somebody catch up to me, and then I would have to find something to get over the line. And my experience is that this is not an uncommon thing for people to do. I now know a little bit more about why it happens, but for me as a teenager, that was something that I found interesting, but only from the fact that I couldn't work out how not to do it, and it was not good. And the other thing I found that the mind and body were connected, and mostly that's through my complete inability as younger to hole short putts in golf. My ability to putt from under a metre was quite embarrassing for someone with an okay handicap. But all those kind of things started to get me very interested in sports psychology. So I did uni, those kind of things. And one of the things you get at university if you do a science degree is this idea of evidence. You must have evidence for everything you do. And a psychologist and good psychological practice is based on the idea of you have to have evidence-based therapies. Now, what I expect many of you get in your coaching education is some mental skills stuff. And it will be around goal setting, and it will be around imagery and relaxation, and maybe some stuff on self-talk and those kind of things. And particularly if you've done higher levels of coaching accreditation, that is the kind of thing that I expect to get into. And the evidence around those kind of things is okay. It's not where I'm at now, and this is why I took around a journey, because for many years through my training, that's what I had. I went and did my postgraduate training, which you have to do to be a psychologist in the early 2000s. And at that time, if you picked up a textbook, an applied sports psychology textbook, that's what you got. And some of it's very good. But the evidence for it is primarily two things. One is some people in the 80s did some research where they took successful Olympians and less successful Olympians. I don't like describing unsuccessful Olympians. That doesn't seem right to me. If you make it, you're successful. You might be less than the people that got the medals, but it's still a fair achievement. And what they showed in the difference between those two groups is that the groups that are more successful tended to use more goal setting, better able to use relaxation, they used imagery more, they had more positive self-talk. So that was a source of evidence, which is good. All right, if these people are better, we should use more of these things. You take that information, you go to the next stage and you say, all right, well, we need to experiment with this kind of thing. So we get some simple experiments to start with. You take two groups of people. Maybe it's a simple thing like putting, not a simple thing like putting. Might be dart throwing, might be basketball shooting. A fairly closed skill, and you say, get this group to do it with imagery, and this group to do it not with imagery. And at the end of that, you can pretty reliably demonstrate that the group that did imagery and practice will learn faster than the group that just practiced. They'll get a bit more fancy. All right, what happens if you do imagery versus nothing? And actually, imagery is better for learning a skill than doing nothing. It's not as good as practice, but you will actually learn faster only doing imagery without even practicing a skill, which is great for when we get times when people are injured and they can't actually practice skill, because I've got some nice evidence that says, actually, keep imagining yourself doing your sport, keep imagining yourself doing it well, and you'll actually hold on to some of your skills, or you'll learn new skills better than you will if you don't, okay? Even though you can't physically practice. It's good. The problem with some of that evidence, though, is the athletes I work with, and even the athletes you work with, don't start from nothing. So when we take a group of undergraduate uni students and we teach them to throw darts and we use imagery, that's good if you want to train university students to throw darts. But actually, most of you are dealing with people who already have some skills, and you're not teaching them new skills from nothing, but you're adapting or changing or those kind of things. And we actually don't do a lot of research around some of those kind of things. So it's very hard to find good evidence that says, if you're a already reasonably high-performing athlete, these skills will make you better. So what I ended up finding myself is that I found it difficult to really know exactly how to do this, because the research doesn't say, oh, and if you do 20 minutes 2 times a day, you'll get this much gain. We don't know a dose-response relationship for mental skills. So I can do some of that mental skill stuff. I can advocate it. In uni, I had to write programs. And then following university, I worked at the Australian Institute of Sport for a couple of years. And again, there did similar things. And it's okay, it gets things. But what I found throughout time is that I got a bit disillusioned. And then this book came out, which has a great title. But the bit that got me was this thing here, Mindfulness, Acceptance, Commitment Approach. Now this is a relatively new approach in psychology. It's 20 to 30 years old, but it's growing very rapidly. It's got a few changes to that mental skills approach. It deals with things a little differently. And when this came out, I kind of read it, but I didn't really pay enough attention to it, because now I do this as primarily my job.